What's good, everybody? Hope y'all doing well. So Rodwave just dropped his album Last Lap. In this video, I'm going to be showing y'all how you can make some pain beats similar to the beats on that album. I'm going to be breaking down the entire process of making this beat, all the way from the original melody starter to the finished beat. And so with all that being said, let's jump right into it. So for this video, I already made the beat, so I'm just going to show y'all a quick preview of what it sounds like, and I'll just go ahead and break it down after that. To start off this beat, I got this vocal sample from Splice. It is from the Sounds of JDOM pack. If you're interested, this is the exact sample I used. It's the vocal loop Haunted. So I took that vocal loop and I put it into FL and I chopped it like this. I'm just gonna go ahead and show y'all how I did that. So I started this beat by moving my project tempo to the same tempo as this, which is 142. And then once I had it set on that, I double clicked on it and I changed the mode from resample to stretch. And then I changed it back to resample. And I turned the metronome on and I kept moving the tempo up until I thought it sounded good. So I liked the speed on this, but I wanted it to be a little bit lower in pitch than the resample version. I switched it to stretch and I just started playing around with the pitch a little bit. Eventually I settled on moving it up by plus 200 cents. So the original key was A minor, so now it's in B minor. As you can tell, I put a little bit of effects on it, so I threw that into a mixer track. I started by putting down some reverb on it with these settings. It's slightly different from the default settings. I think the only thing I did was adjust the wet, decay, and the low cut. And then I put on this high pass EQ, and then I put on Fruity Love Filter on the low pass 2 preset and just moved the parameter down and to the right like this. And so for the chopping, what I did is I cut off the second half of it. So I took this and I cut it off after about 8 measures. I let this last note here ring out, so I cut it off right there. And it sounded a little bit empty right here at the beginning, so I went ahead to this last part and I just chopped it like that and moved it down to the second measure here, and I turned the gain down on it just so it matches the level of these right here. For the second half of the 16 measures, I made a cut right here and moved it to the 10th measure. And I cut it off about right here. Other than that, I'd put another slice over here. I think it was something like this, but I don't remember now. And that's how I got my final chopped vocal loop, and it sounds something like this all together. The next thing I did after that was put down a piano pattern. The sound that I'm using is the LA Custom Cinematic preset in Keyscape. For my keys pattern, I kept it pretty simple. It's only chords and some bass notes, and the chords themselves are actually pretty generic. It might not be obvious looking at it right now, but if I move this up and I highlight these chords right here, you can tell it's just a 1-7-6 progression. So in other words, we are in the key of B minor, so I'm gonna start with the first note in the scale as my root note for the first chord, and then move it down to the 7th note and then the 6th, and just build chords off of that. So all I did for this first half of the pattern here is just drop this top note in the first chord 1 octave, and then just add in a couple of these notes. This one is an octave of the bottom note, and then this one is a 7th of the bottom note. So if I move this down an octave, it's on the root note of the chord. If I move this one, it should be 1/2 step below it. These are just notes that are in the B minor scale. For the second half of the pattern, it's the same thing. The primary difference is that this F sharp is up 1 octave from where it was in the first. And then I also added the 7th note with that A. And then for these two, I ended up dropping the high note 1 octave and then throwing in the little top notes here. And then for my bass notes, it's pretty much just copying the root notes above here, so it's B, A, and G. Down here, B, A, and G, just a couple octaves down. And then for this one right here, I switched it up a little bit. Instead of having A, the 7th note in the scale, I put it down to F sharp, which is the 5th. It doesn't conflict with this chord because I put down an F sharp up here too. Overall, this is what the chords are sounding like by themselves. So like I said, super simple. I didn't put down a top melody or anything. So now going into the next sound, which is the bass guitar. And this is from my upcoming multi-kit, just my go-to bass guitar sound. And I just copied those same notes from the previous pattern. The only difference is I just dropped the B 1 octave. Kind of intricate part of this beat outside of the vocal sample, and that is the arcade chops, and these are the little guitar chops, and these are just some guitar chops that I added. So the first arcade bank I went to was Dreamy Guitar from the chopped line. If you want a lot of those guitar ear candy type of chops, I would recommend using the chopped line from arcade. They've got a ton of different banks with that, and you'll see that the other two banks I ended up using are also from this. So the first thing I added was just this kind of background guitar picking. And that just loops over and over again. It just acts like a layer for what we have with the bass guitar and the piano. It just gives it a little bit more rhythm, some more bounce to it, and it brings a little more energy to the beat. As you can tell with the rest of my guitar chops, they're pretty all over the place, but I'll just show you all the patterns. For my next set of guitar chops, I used the Almost There bank from the same chopped line, and I threw down these guitar chops. These two are the same, and then this one's just a little switch up. And then from that same Almost There line, I put down another guitar chop. I think it's just an octave down from the other one, so I had to open up a separate one. I'll just play the guitar chops by themselves for the first part of the beat so you can kind of get a gist of where the placement is. So for the most part, these are hitting on the first beat of even measures. So on this one, it hits on the 4th measure, first beat. For this one, it hits on the 8th measure, first beat. And then this one, I moved it so it hits on the 2nd measure. Those are usually the places that they sit the best, but you don't have to put them there. And then for my last guitar accent, this is a sound that is in my Resonance multi-kit. And that just hits when the drums come in. So now that we got all the melodics out the way, which was pretty much the bulk of the beat, we'll move on to our drums here. By the way, all of these drums are from my Evolve drum kit, which is in the description. It's 100% free. Go ahead, go get it. These are some recurring sounds that I use in a lot of videos. The first thing I started off with was my snare. Just real simple, put it down on the 3rd beat of every measure, and then I paired that with my hi-hat, and it's just a basic 2-step pattern. I just went in with the 1/6 beat snapping and drew in these rolls right here, end of the 4th measure. So overall, these are pretty simple too. Then after that, I threw down my openet, and this just sits on the 4th beat of the 2nd and 6th measures. Then I put down my kick, which just hits on like the major 808 hits. And it's just the same thing for the second half of the pattern. And then moving on to my last drum sound, which is my 808. If I move all these to their correct octaves, you can tell that this is just the bass piano pattern, just put into the 808 and a couple of the notes chopped around. And so by itself sounds something like this. And putting it all together, you get some drums that sound like this. And then for the rest of the beat, I just went ahead, arranged all the little components that I had, and yeah, that was pretty much the entire beat. So that's gonna do it for me. Hope y'all enjoyed it and found it pretty helpful. Go ahead and download the Evolve drum kit. Again, it's 100% free. First link in the description. And that's gonna do it for me, and I'll see y'all in the next video.